Shabbat Shalom, Mishpacha v'Chaverim. This message is prepared especially for those who come and want to discover Messianic Judaism. Hopefully that will give them an answer. We have experienced often that people raise these questions, so we hope that will be recorded this time and be able to serve for many at your time, whenever you want to look at it, so be on our website. These days, many people, when they are discovering the roots of their faith, especially those who come from Christianity, from the Christian faith, leads them to the discovering of life and faith of Yeshua HaMashiach. The more they search, the more they discover that Yeshua did not come to this world to establish Christianity, but rather he came to do healing for Judaism, to restore to the proper setting what was Judaism supposed to be, to reform Judaism. Now, as an effect of his ministry in this world, in Israel, came to existence a form of Judaism that is called by his opponents in the book of Masech HaShlechim, the book of Acts 24:5, as the sect of the Nazarenes. You probably have read that before, didn't you? So today this movement worldwide is recognized as a Messianic Judaism. And the name Messianic Judaism already is pointing, for everyone who has some basic knowledge at least, that the Judaism that we practice is according to Yeshua HaMashiach. Not according to his opponents of his time. Today, many people who are discovering the roots of their faith, when they come to the conviction that Christianity was not the religion of Yeshua, nor it was the religion of his disciples, the Shlachim, the one that he sent, their desire is to follow such a way. And we know that in the book of Acts, Masech HaShlechim 24:14, that way is called simply the way. And that you can find in the book of Acts 24:14. That means that his followers, the Jewish people of his time that were following Yeshua, were practicing Judaism according to the way of Yeshua HaMashiach. Now, that need to be always said that they did not practice according to the way of his opponents. After these people who discover the Jewish roots of their faith, they are zealous for their faith, for what they practice. They go through much of repentance, much of studying, debates, and their heart is set to follow the way of Yeshua. But unfortunately, many of these people are confused what was the way of Yeshua HaMashiach. They're confused and they often relate that way to his opponents, who at the time of Yeshua they were called the Pharisees, and today they are called Rabbinical Judaism. So many people, when they hear, especially those that are fresh in this journey, when they learn this is Messianic Judaism, they connect this automatically. It must be something like the Judaism that we know, which is called Rabbinic Judaism, but in the biblical time was the Pharisaic way of Judaism. Pharisees, they were the dominated movement within Judaism. They were the scholars, the doctor, the PhD people of today, we could say, in Judaism. Many people will turn to them for answers. What shall we do? And how shall we do things? So, what was the main difference between the way of Yeshua and the way of the Pharisees, which was the leading movement at that time? It is very important to understand what is Messianic Judaism, how are the differences. And one of the things that are set apart the way of Yeshua from the way of the Pharisees was that in that time, many of the Pharisees, they practice and they were teaching the oracle transmitted teachings from either their fathers or even their own that they invented. And they were actually often taking that position of the oracle commandments or traditions above the Word of God, above the prophets, above the Torah. Now, this was the main contrast between the way of life, of faith, between Yeshua HaMashiach and the Pharisees, who are today recognized, again, I say, as a rabbinical Judaism, who until today stands in the opposition to the person of Yeshua HaMashiach and in opposition to his teaching. The same contrast that we see in the scriptures, especially when we read the Gospels, the Torah, we find the same contrast when we come and actually discover what is Etz Chaim Messianic Fellowship, and when you compare this with the rabbinical Judaism. Now, many people who come here and recognize that we in Etz Chaim Messianic Fellowship want to restore the first century way of Messianic Judaism, unfortunately expect that we should recognize in the same way New Moon, or in Hebrew, Rosh Chodesh, as it is practiced in rabbinical Judaism. At this point, I need to admit that the Etz Chaim Messianic Fellowship has many things in common, actually, with rabbinical Judaism, or you can say Orthodox Judaism. We do share many things together in common, as it was in the 1st century AD. But also, as it was in the 1st century AD, we also share difference with rabbinical Judaism or Orthodox Judaism that we practice here. And one of the main difference between them and us is how we recognize the new moon, or also our attitude towards oral traditions or oral commandments. We do not allow that any of the oral commandments or oral traditions will make us or could turn us away from faithfulness and obedience to the simple mitzvot, the commandments of the Torah, or the mitzvot and the commandments of Yeshua HaMashiach. Therefore, the way of recognizing and celebrating when is the new moon, when is the Rosh Chodesh, in our case, is an evident proof of differences and a mark of our discipleship towards Yeshua HaMashiach and set us apart from rabbinical Judaism. So now, let me present for you who are new, especially new to this Kehillah, why or how we recognize the Rosh Chodesh, the new moon. To begin, let us first recognize a simple truth, which is a very fundamental truth, that is, if anyone who would want to recognize and celebrate the Moadim, which is the Hebrew word for the appointed times of our Father, one must know when is the first day of the month in which they are to be observed. Would you agree with me? Saying so, we in Etz Chaim Messianic Fellowship are recognizing the beginning of the new moon, or the month, when we have a proof that there was a sign in the skies or in the firmament appeared of the new sliver of the new moon. So from that time we calculate when the feasts are to be celebrated. For that we need to have testimony of that people really saw in the skies the first crescent of the new moon. Such practice can very often disturb many people's Hellenistic mindset and their planning for their vacation that they want to take off for the appointed times for the Moadim. Nevertheless, to watch and to be on alert in observing the skies, or the firmament, for the new crescent of the new moon, is teaching us a very old biblical truth and the mentality of biblical Judaism of the 1st century AD, and also confirm that for us the authority is Yeshua HaMashiach and not rabbinical Judaism. Now, to prove this statement, we have a witness in the scriptures and also in the historical records of the 1st century AD Judaism. So we're going to start with Bereshit 1:14. Bereshit, which is Genesis chapter 1:14. Adonai Eloheinu in that place revealed to us what is the purpose for setting for us the lights in the firmament or in the skies. Now let me quote this passage from the Jewish Tanakh. For this difference is between rabbinical Judaism and us. And for that reason I quote this from the Stone edition of Tanakh in Bereshit 1:14, Genesis 1:14, where it says, I quote, God said, let there be luminaries in the firmament of the heaven to separate between day and night, and they shall serve as a signs, and for festivals, and for days and years. End of time. End of quote, sorry. Havrim, friends, especially the end of this verse, of this pasuk, is very well translated. Most of the other English translations, they don't show this exactly as it is here. That means that these luminaries, these lights in the firmament, are given to us for the purpose to give us light, that's one thing, but also to serve as a sign for festivals, days, and years. The lights about which we read in that verse, Genesis 1:14, are speaking about sun and moon. So I hope it is not difficult to recognize that simple truth that you find in that verse. Well, in the biblical Judaism, there was no problem or no contention in the case as we recognize the authority of Jerusalem to be at that time. But today, there is contention about that topic. Because the current rabbinical Judaism, from the time of Hillel II, who in the years between 330 to 365 Common Era, was a prince in the last Sanhedrin, adopted from that time, calculated by him, a calendar that is based on the calculation of the astronomical new moon. So you may have heard before about astronomical new moon, or rabbinical new moon, or by sighting to see the new moon. And based on this calculation, from that time of Hillel II, all the feasts, all the appointed times are calculated when they are going to happen, until today and even further. A question: what does this mean for us, believers and the disciples of Yeshua HaMashiach? The important thing here is the differences between the astronomical new moon and the one that we recognize by observing the skies. The astronomical new moon is calculated mathematically, and of the point when the moon is in conjunction with the sun and our planet Earth. So when they're in line, in conjunction, in one line, that is the time when the moon is completely dark. You have a few days in a month that there is no moon. With the best skies we can have, this is a darkness, no moon. Now, when is the moment per second that this conjunction is broken and the moon starts to go off the conjunction? This is where it's calculated to actually recognize as an astronomical new moon. So all the scientists who work in the astronomy, this is how they recognize. But this is also how Hillel II calculated in that time the calendar that lasts until today. This position of the new moon, rabbinical new moon calendar, often is different in appearance of the light of the first visible crescent of the Rosh Chodesh, new moon, on the firmament. That is, of course, to be according to the scriptures. Different between the rabbinical, which is astronomical Rosh Chodesh, and the visible one can go as far as up to between 1 and 2 days in difference. 1 and 2 days in difference. So question, how or what is then the effect of the calendar of our Creator in this case? Well, the answer I think is very clear and simple. We have a shift of celebrating the feast, sometimes 1 or often even 2 days in a difference. It happens that often in a time we observe even 2 days later Yom Teruah, that particular feast. When it comes to Pesach, I think most often is 1 day. But as we have observed this in our past in this Kehillah, in the synagogue, we've noticed that when it comes to Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets, or also known as Rosh Hashanah, New Year, we often ended up 2 days difference. That really can disturb people's mind, especially those who actually look to both what the Jews celebrate in worldwide and where we stay, what our position in it. At this point, we can ask many questions. One of them will be, does Adonai order us to calculate new moon, or rather observe the firmament? Another question is, did he give us a light on the firmament for signs for the festival days and years, or rather order us to consider the darkest time of the firmament and calculate the conjunction between sun, moon, and earth? This is the question we should ask when we think about observing festivals and find to where is the proper time for it. Havarim, friends, the answer we would like to leave in your hands. It is your personal choice. But for us, as the Chaim Messianic Fellowship, we do not recognize the rabbinical calendar, but rather we take the position of the sighting of the new moon. Another question you may raise is why there is no equal differences. If there is a differences between the sighting of the new moon, the visible, the crescent, why there is no equal differences, let's say 1 day and a period, we know it's 1 day, or 2 days, period, we know 2 days. The answer is kind of simple. Because the dark phase of the moon can take between 1.5 days to 3.5 days. And it's not always the same. This depends on the position of the earth, how the earth is turned, why we have a winter, because the earth turns away from sun, so it's colder. When it comes to summer, the northern sphere of the earth, it's closer to the sun, so it gets much more heat. Is that correct? Also depends of the season that we are in the year time. And one more thing depends on when is the conjunction happening, what time of the day or what time of the night. Because the conjunction can happen during the day or during the night. It's not regulated, that must be a certain hour or minute. So what is only regulated, that the cycle of the astronomical moon is precise. And about this I hope to speak maybe another time. But that's why the differences between 1 day or 2 days are hard to predict. Or in other words, we can say it is hard to predict if we're going to see the moon 1 day later than the rabbinical or 2 days later. So it is again a problem to those who watch both calendars, rabbinical and the sighting of the moon. Now, often when you go to website, you may see actually little icon that is showing you current phase of the moon. But in most cases, that current phase of the moon on the icon, that the clock is ticking on it, it's showing you the astronomical new moon, not the sighting of the new moon. I have not seen yet a module for the website that actually could show you exactly where the visible crescent is, or the stage of the moon, the shining time. So this, be aware of it. Also, there is lots of Messianic Jewish calendars that they do print the rabbinical order of the feast when they appear. And when people come and look, it's just like, well, didn't we supposed to have here the feast? And you say one day, or we have to wait for report, and it's confusion. I understand, can be very much confusion. I think this is very important that when we look into this, we look with our heart and soul and the scriptures, and may the Father give us the wisdom what to do with this. So the biggest problem, like I said before, is about the 7th month, also known as Tishri from Babylonian tradition, or Etanim from the tradition before the time of Babylon. People can sometimes cannot reconcile, oh, are we Jewish? Is this Judaism? Why we're different? Are you saying that we know better than these rabbis, from the old times, carrying this? All these questions can actually enter our mind and can trouble us. Sometimes you brave enough and you may come and ask me the question, can you answer, explain this to me? Sometimes you're shy, you don't want to talk, you're afraid that you may actually disturb or create division. No, don't never be disturbed. Always you can ask questions. So this Feast of Trumpets especially, it's a huge issue. Now, when we look to this 2 days shift when it comes to the Feast of Trumpets, or Yom Teruah, and when we look to the lenses of Messianic Jewish theology and understanding, the answers may come much quicker than you look to the lenses of Judaism. I'd like to have a second part to this message, Allah willing, next Shabbat, to give you more insight. Today is just a briefly good introduction to it. So, for example, what Feast of Trumpets, I can ask, what represents in Messianic Jewish theology? Can anybody tell me what the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, actually is foreshadowing for us?
The second coming of Messiah.
Right, the second coming of Mashiach. Feast of Trumpets, it's a clear-cut message for Messianic Jewish theology. It's pointing to the return of Yeshua HaMashiach. So, then the Advent, or the time of waiting and preparation for that particular new moon, or Rosh Chodesh, as we say in Hebrew, it must be a very special one. And by the tradition, again, it's a rabbinical tradition, and we adopt also as our, we prepare them in the Mount of Elul. We prepare ourselves in searching our hearts and searching our mind and our homes and our relationships to make sure that we do best to our understanding and knowledge and revelation, teshuvah in our life from any sin, any unclean relationships, or anything that is unclean in our homes to be removed. Why? Because we want to be ready. This is like a every year rehearsal for His second coming, preparation of the bride. So even at the end of the Mount of Elul, we do immersions, declaration of complete restoration and complete dedication. So it's a huge event. I don't know how you understand this, but for me it touches me a lot and teaches me very important lesson that holiness is not to be based on declaration, but based on your walk, based on your obedience and faithfulness. So the whole Advent, the time for preparation for Yom Teruah, has something in common. We have to search. Will you agree with me? We have to search to be pure before the Holy One of Israel, before the return of His Mashiach, so that He will find a bride waiting for Him, spotless.